All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday. My name is Josh. This is the JMULL Show, part of the 110 Sports Media Network. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Wednesday. We got a lot to get to today. We got baseball. We got basketball. We got pretty much everything in between. At about 11:20, we'll talk to Chris Brown, our resident 110 sports baseball expert. Talk to him about what he's thinking in these series, specifically the one starting today. We'll ask him about what he saw in the 4 games that were played yesterday, see what he's got to say about that. There was some, there were a couple outcomes that made a lot of sense, a couple outcomes that made not quite so much sense, a couple outcomes that made me feel smart, a couple outcomes that made me feel not so smart, but we'll get to all of that with Chris Brown at 1:20. After that, we'll probably talk a little bit more baseball, throw some of the show, and go from there on a Wednesday. But where I want to start, you'll be shocked to hear, I want to start with the NBA Finals tonight, the beginning of the NBA Finals between the Lakers and the Heat. First of all, if I had told you 8 years ago that the next time the Heat would be in the Finals would actually not be, that it would be fewer than 10 years from now. He leaves the Heat, LeBron that is, and they just sort of, they went and got all the pieces to get LeBron and to get Chris Bosh and get Dwayne Wade and do what they did for 4 years and 4 years, 3 years, 4 years. Do what they did for 4 years, and then after that, you rebuild. Because LeBron's going to leave at some point, Dwayne Wade's going to retire at some point, Chris Bosh is going to retire at some point. Of course, Chris Bosh's career ended quicker than anybody thought it would with his blood clotting and some of that sort of not basketball related medical issues that he had. Dwayne Wade, went to Chicago, and when LeBron left, you knew it was going to be iffy if they were going to even contend in the East again, and that was the case, especially when LeBron leaves to go back to an East team. Not only has it been 6-7 years since he left Miami, the next time that Miami was going to be in the finals, they were going to be playing LeBron, and he wasn't going to be playing for the Cavs. He was going to be playing for the Lakers. And the way that this sort of ended, of course, you have Pat Riley's history with LeBron, Pat Riley's history with the Lakers, Pat Riley coming out and really just being salty about the fact that LeBron was leaving him. But he really was outspoken about being disappointed and angry about the way LeBron handled leaving Miami in the first place. And now you've got a finals between the two. And on sort of the same note, I think we need to appreciate the fact that Eric Spoelstra watched LeBron play basketball really, really up close for 4 years. Now, there's only so much that you can do to stop LeBron. I mean, nobody stops LeBron. You try to contain him. You try to minimize his impact as much as possible. But first of all, Eric Spoelstra is an incredible coach and continues to be one of the more... taking a team like this to the finals makes him even more impressive, in my opinion. You take a team like LeBron, Wade, and Bosh that is very much a juggling personalities and superstars job. And then you take a team like this ragtag group of Miami Heat players that's led by Jimmy Butler, that has a lot of guys that have things to prove, that has Bam Adebayo. You have no stars, and we'll get to this in a second. You have no true stars on that team. I mean, Jimmy Butler's the closest that you get, but he's certainly, I think, a level below some of those other stars, and certainly the other two superstars in this series. But this is an incredible coaching job, getting these guys to buy into the Heat culture, and it's resulted in them not only beating two teams specifically in these playoffs that a lot of people thought they wouldn't beat, being the Bucks and the Celtics, but they did it they did it in a way that left you not doubting that the Heat were the better team. It's not like it was a fluke. Now, of course, that's the point of 7-game series, to not let a fluke end up being the reason somebody wins or loses a series. But the point being is that you didn't feel like the Heat got lucky. You didn't feel like the Celtics and the Bucks had an incredibly bad series, and it wasn't to the credit of the Heat. He played great defense. They played better in crunch time against Boston in particular, even though Boston had gotten to the point where they were pretty close to, if not had completely deciphered the zone by the end of the series. It just wasn't enough. And then, of course, against Milwaukee, they pretty much controlled that series from start to finish. But there's a lot to unpack here, and it's certainly not it's going to be a lot closer than a finals between a 1 and a 5 seed should be. I mean, these teams are a lot closer than they should be, and what makes this so interesting is that these are two rosters that are they're built completely differently. The philosophy behind building these rosters are completely different. If you take the 10 best players in this series, if you listed the 10 best players in this series, the Lakers would have 1 and 2. LeBron and AD. It wouldn't be particularly close. But then you have this Heat team who have 4 of the next 5. The next 4, 5 of the next 6. Next you go Bam, Jimmy, Tyler Hero, or Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero. Maybe throw Rondo in there next. But then you're back to Duncan Robinson, Jay Crowder, and Danny Green, very comparable. KCP, comparable. Alex Caruso, comparable. You've got one team that has the majority of the best players in this series versus the team that has the 2 best, far and away, players in this series. So which one of those things matters more? And ironically, the answer to that question might come down to the role players on this Lakers team, because the Lakers role players have been enough in these playoffs, and that was one of the biggest questions coming in to 2000 into the bubble, and into the playoffs in particular is, listen, AD and LeBron are going to be spectacular. Are the Lakers role players good enough to supplement what you're getting from LeBron and AD? And the answer to the question so far has been a resounding yes. But you also, you played Portland, who by the end was banged up. You played the Rockets, who were outmatched from basically the very beginning. The Lakers made an adjustment after game 1. They put Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee on the bench. They said, Anthony Davis, you're going to play the 5 and you're going to like it, and we're going to win this series because of it. That's exactly what happened. And they steamrolled Houston, and then Anthony Davis was the biggest mismatch in the Western Conference Finals, and that was the only thing that could have saved the Nuggets if Jokic continued to be the biggest mismatch. He didn't have a great series. Jamal Murray was good, but ultimately the Lakers just too much for the Nuggets. And here we are again in a series where the Lakers have the 2 best players. But I think in this series, they have, 2 of the 4. Anthony Davis has been the best offensive player in these playoffs. But he's also gone against Jokic, Mason Plumlee, PJ Tucker. The Heat have the guy that might be at the top of the list when it comes to guarding Anthony Davis. There aren't very many people, maybe Giannis, just because he's bigger than Bam. But Bam Adebayo is very, very high on the list of players that I'd like more than anybody else to guard Anthony Davis. Now, the tricky thing here is, what if the Lakers play big? Because Boston didn't force, Boston had Daniel Tice, but then after that it was a lot of perimeter guys, wings, Jaylen Brown's, Jason Tatum's. The Lakers will start a lineup, and Dwight Howard started at one point in the Western Conference Finals, so it's still up in the air which big, whether JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard gets the start, but they're going to start a lineup that involves two bigs with Anthony Davis and then insert one of the other two. And what that does is it puts you in a situation of asking the question, who does Bam guard? Because if Bam can guard Anthony Davis all series, then I think that's a good thing for the Heat. But if Bam has to split his time between Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard, then that makes things more interesting, because of course in that scenario, even though you'd love Bam to be the guy guarding Anthony Davis, if Dwight Howard's on the floor, he has to be the guy to guard Dwight Howard, because Jay Crowder, I think, could at least make Anthony Davis sweat a little bit. Anthony Davis likes to hang out on the perimeter. Anthony Davis doesn't love playing against guys that are super physical. Jay Crowder's been in the NBA for a long time because he's a physical, aggressive defender. But Jay Crowder, Jay Crowder can't guard Dwight Howard on the block the entire time, and that's where Dwight Howard's going to live, is on the block. With that being said, Bam is one of my favorite guys to go and guard Anthony Davis, and on the flip side of things, Anthony Davis is one of my favorite guys to go and guard Bam. In the two games they played against each other this season, Davis definitely got the better of the matchup. 29.5 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists to Bam's 11.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. That's in 2 games that these teams played this season. But what's really interesting here is the zone. So we know Miami's going to throw a zone in there. But in a weird way, not in a weird way, it's just unorthodox, because typically a zone is to pack the middle and to not let big guys run rampant. The Miami zone very much made Boston's perimeter players make mistakes. And what it left out was wide open in the middle. Now, the problem for the Celtics is that the guy to be in the middle was Daniel Tice. No disrespect to Daniel Tice, but Daniel Tice is not on the floor for the Celtics because of his uncanny offensive instinct. And then you play the rest of the Celtics big men. It's sort of a by committee center position for Boston. You got Enes Kanter in there some. You got Robert Williams in there some. Grant Williams can play the 5 a little bit as well. But what you get is a team that is perimeter dependent and can't truly take advantage of that open spot in the center. The Lakers have 2 of the best guys in the NBA to put in the center of that zone. That mid-range jump shot at the foul line is going to be open all series. It was there for Daniel Tice all series. Anthony Davis has taken more mid-range jump shots per game than everybody but 2 players in these playoffs, and he's made 60% of them, 50%, 50.6% of those mid-range jump shots. If you give Anthony Davis that jump shot, he's going to take it without hesitation. And there was clearly a little bit of hesitation from Tice or whoever was in that spot in the middle of that zone. LeBron is going to break the zone. He's aggressive. He's smart. He's like a quarterback that sees a defense once and has figured it out. Now, the Heat don't play zone all the time, of course. They actually play zone not most of the time. But it's not going to take 4 games for LeBron to figure out how to attack the zone like it did the Boston Celtics. It might not even take a full game for him to figure it out, because he's just going to do it. And if you can slide him into the middle of that zone a little bit, slide Anthony Davis in the middle of that zone a little bit, all of a sudden you've got all of the options to break down that zone. You can get Dwight Howard on the back end of it for a lob, who, he's bumping with Duncan Robinson because that zone that they play has their big guys out front, like bothering with that length, which is great when you're playing a perimeter dependent team. But when you're playing a team that can put Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis on the floor, Dwight Howard, certainly not the dominant presence that he used to be, but he can go up and get a lob against Duncan Robinson without sweating. And it's gonna be really really interesting what that does to the Heat defense, because even if they, when they play man, like I mentioned previously, you've got Bam to guard Anthony Davis, assuming that. And I think they'll try and find ways to get him onto Anthony Davis more. Whether that means Myers Leonard gets some minutes for the first time really in these playoffs, whether that means Kelly Olynyk is back into the lineup some. I think they'll figure out a way to get Bam on Anthony Davis, and I also think in crunch time we're talking about 4 guards, wings around Anthony Davis and 4 guards, wings around Bam Adebayo, and those 2 guys will go at it at the 5 position, specifically late in games. But then you've got bodies to put on LeBron. You've got Jimmy Butler, your Andre Iguodala's, your Jay Crowders. Now, I'm officially to the point where I don't care who you have on the other team to guard LeBron. He's gonna find a way to get it done anyways, and it's a finals, so he's gonna find a way to get it done. But they've at least got guys that you feel good about guarding him, as long as you can keep them, keep the Lakers from forcing a lot of switches. Because if LeBron spends all series switching, you get a KCP pick and that switches Tyler Hero onto you get a Danny Green pick and that gets Duncan Robinson onto him, like that can be scary. You need to, when you're playing man-to-man, I thought that happened quite a bit, specifically early in the Boston series, is Boston would run this half-assed screen and it would switch Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero onto Jason Tatum. And that's exactly what Boston wanted. You can't let that happen quite as much here, because you can't let Duncan Robinson switch onto LeBron ever. You need that to never happen on the offensive end, because it's going to be a bucket every time. It just is. It's going to be a bucket every single time it happens. There aren't a ton of spots in this series where the Heat have the advantage, the overwhelming advantage, but one of those spots is in the backcourt. And specifically, your KCP, Alex Caruso, Rajon Rondo, Danny Green committee versus your Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Duncan Robinson committee. Dragic could be one of the X factors in this series because he's going to be incredibly important for the Miami Heat. Incredibly important. Not only do the Heat have the better offensive guards, so the Lakers are going to have to do scheming for those guards. The Heat aren't going to have to do a whole lot of that. Their focus is going to be on Anthony Davis, on LeBron James, and as long as you're just getting a hand up in front of those 3-point shooters around those 2 guys, and now the Lakers 3-point shooters, quote unquote, aren't exactly dynamite, and Danny Green hasn't had the best of postseasons, even though he's incredible in NBA finals historically. The place on the offensive end where the Heat can take advantage is with these guards that are going to be guarded by Rondo, Caruso, KCP, who's a serviceable defender for sure and has gotten some of the more difficult assignments in these playoffs so far for the Lakers. You've got Goran Dragic going against Caruso and Rondo. That's where your opportunities are. And if you got multiple guards on the floor, Tyler Hero has been destroying smaller guards. That's the thing about Hero, is that he's a guard and he's a playmaker and he can score at all 3 levels of the floor, and a lot of times he finds guards that are smaller than him on him, because he's certainly not a small guard in his own right. I actually think if Tyler Hero can get to the point where he's playing point guard, that's a really, really scary thing for the rest of the NBA and a really great thing for the Heat. He's certainly not there yet, and of course you'd rather have Dragic be your point guard. That's 100% the case. But If he gets to a point where he's, a 6'4", 6'5", and I don't know exactly how tall he is off the top of my head, we can look real quick, but a 6'4", 6'5" guard, 6'5". So a 6'5" guard, I mean, that was the thing, when Steph Curry came into the league, it was, can he play point guard? Clearly the answer is yes, and now all of a sudden you've got a 6'3" point guard. And 6'3" point guard is Steph is an all-time great at this point, so I don't have to tell you about Steph Curry. But Tyler Hero doesn't even need to, obviously, to be successful in this league. But if he could, and you've got a 6'5" point guard going on every night, especially with Jimmy Butler and Duncan Robinson and this core that they already have, it's I think there's a lot of opportunity there for the Heat, but that's neither here nor there really at this point. The point being is that the advantage for the Heat really comes in the backcourt. Now, the Lakers have played 3 teams in this series, in these playoffs, that had guards that gave them the advantage. CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard in Portland. James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who's just like borderline bad at basketball at this point. But Russell Westbrook and James Harden alone. And then Jamal Murray. And, I think it'll be interesting to see who LeBron guards in crunch time. It probably will be Jimmy Butler. But if Dragic or Hero has got it going, clearly, as we saw in the Nuggets series, that he's not afraid to say, listen, Frank Vogel, I'm going to guard the best guy on the other team right now, regardless of who it is. Now, if it's Bam, then Anthony Davis, of course, is going to get that assignment. But he went and guarded Jamal Murray, and I believe it was at the end of Game 4. He went and guarded Jamal Murray, said it was time to win a basketball game, and I went and tried to shut him down. He did just that. But that guard position is where the Heat have a really big advantage. I'm absolutely pumped for this series. There are a sneaky number of really interesting angles to come at this from, whether it's the roster, whether it's LeBron versus the Heat, whether it's LeBron versus Pat Riley, 2 superstars versus a team that's just got the 4 next best players on the floor, whatever it might be. It's a really interesting series, and it's going to be one that goes a lot deeper than a series that is a 1 versus 5 should go. I mean, we're talking about, in terms of seed lines, this is a round 2 matchup. These teams are in the same conference. It's a round 2 matchup. But then again, the Heat were supposed to lose to the Bucks. Supposed to. That one was, the Bucks were the 1 seed. They had Giannis. They had the MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year. The Heat handled them. And then you thought the Celtics might just have a little too much. And then Tyler Hero happens, and Bam has one of his best games as a pro. Hero the same, that 37 points on 14 of 21 shooting, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then you've got a team that has a lot of weapons. So which one does it end up? Which one ends up mattering more? My prediction for the series is Lakers in 7. The Heat do a really good job of hanging around and battling back, and then being the better team in the last 6 minutes of the game. I don't think they're going to be the better team in the last 6 minutes of a game in a finals against LeBron. I don't think they'll win enough of those close games. I don't think any of these games will be blowouts. I really don't think that. And some of these games will be close, and the Heat will get multiple games. But ultimately, I'll go with LeBron until he gives me a reason to not go with him when he gets to a finals. And, I don't blame LeBron when he loses to the Warriors. He shouldn't have won any of those finals. He won one of them. Shouldn't have won any of them. Most of the time, LeBron is not favored in the finals. He's only lost 1 finals in which he was favored. And that was year 1 against Dallas and Miami. The rest of the time, he wasn't favored. He's actually won more finals when he hasn't been favored than finals he's lost when he is. So I'll go Lakers in 7. I'm pumped for it in a lot of ways. and can't wait for it to get going. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Chris Brown. We had day one of the National League wildcard. Was it National League wildcard? I think it might have been both sides. We had day one of wildcard series yesterday. Day two is today. We got some more. We got some game twos and game ones. A lot of baseball tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk to him about it next. That's coming up next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Wednesday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday. We had 4 baseball games yesterday, right in the thick of things in the wild card round. Now today we have 8 of them. Chris and I were talking just now about how it feels a little bit like an NCAA tournament with so many baseball games. But here to discuss it with us is our resident 110 Sports media baseball expert, Mr. Chris Brown at C Brown Sports on Twitter. Chris, how you doing?
Thanks for having me on. I mean, we got, like you said, we have 8 postseason baseball games on the same day, so it doesn't get much better than that. Looking forward to it.
So let's start with yesterday. You've got, there were some things that happened yesterday that made me look really smart. There were some things that happened yesterday that didn't make me look so smart. The first one is that the Twins got absolutely handled by the Astros yesterday. They only had 4 hits and really were just uninspiring all around. I want to go through the first games of these series and specifically ask you, in this situation, the Astros win 4-1. They get a really nice outing from Zach Greinke. The Twins falling short in multiple spots. Do you feel differently about this series than you did 24 hours ago? If so, why? If not, why?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously in a best-of-3 series now, Houston is just 1 win away from advancing. So obviously, I'm not, certainly as confident about my pick for the Twins in that series. But I'm not necessarily, panicking. It wasn't a complete blowout like we saw with the Yankees Indians game last night. Really, the Twins got a good start from Kenta Maeda, and it all kind of unraveled in the 9th inning when an error by the Twins shortstop Jorge Polanco opened up the door for the Astros to score 3 runs in the 9th inning. And then the Astros got a great performance from Greinke and then from Framber Valdez out of the 10. But generally speaking, that was a pretty close game, down to the wire, and then just sort of one mistake sort of opened the door for things to snowball. So I don't feel extremely different about that, though it's kind of hard to ignore the Twins have now lost 17 consecutive playoff games, which is the most in major North American sports history. So, I mean, it kind of is one of those things where it's like you can't really pick them to win until, like, they got to show it at some point.
Right, yeah. I think it's almost like, I mean, it's kind of like the Clippers, who still haven't even been to a conference finals in their 50-year history. Like, that's impressive. Do you think that adds pressure a little bit here? Do you think that plays into the fact that they basically coughed up their chance to win this game in the bottom of the ninth with errors in the top of the ninth? Is that the kind of thing you think is putting pressure on this, or just one that we jump on as media members to attach to this after a game that ends in this fashion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, they would tell you they're not feeling that pressure, and, it's hard to, draw a line from that one error and that sort of snowball effect. But I think that there's got to be some pressure. I mean, coming into this game, especially game 2 today, you have to win, otherwise it's over, against an Astros team that is looking good now, but generally speaking, people were going into that matchup saying, the Twins should win this series. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you're one game away from elimination. So I think the pressure is definitely on for the Twins, no doubt about it. And this is a capable team, but when you're putting yourself in a scenario, it's game 2 and you have of the playoffs for you, and you have to win or it's over. Mm-hmm. That's a pressured situation.
Where do the Astros go from here in terms of pitching? I mean, you have quite a interesting, pitching stats line here. You had Greinke, who gave up 2 runs in 4 innings, and then Valdez, who went out and threw 5 and also only gave up 2 hits. You have to think that Valdez not going to be available today. You got a different starter, of course, on the mound to start the game. Where do they go from here in the both? Do you have confidence in what they have next in the rotation and also in the bullpen?
Yeah, so, I mean, they're going to go today. They kind of held off on announcing where they were going to go for Game 2, and they're going to start Jose Urquidy for Game 2 today. And he's been pretty good this year. He had a 2.73 ERA in about 30 innings this season. And then tomorrow, if it goes to a Game 3 situation, they're probably going to go with Lance McCullers. So he finished the season really strong as well. So there's, a situation, their bullpen's not as strong as it has been in the past, and there's also the chance that a lot of the young pitching they're relying on could snowball. I mean, you could get to a situation where it kind of collapses, where you have a young pitcher who just, it starts to get away from them, and things, that's something that could happen in this game too against this Twins offense. But generally speaking, the fact that they got through that game yesterday with just 2 pitchers going, and everybody else is pretty fresh, I think that's a good sign for the Astros. And while it could get out of hand, they're relying on a lot of young pitchers. I think that there's real reason for optimism from their perspective.
Were you surprised by Shane Bieber's Game 1 performance? Is this more of part of this is the just unrealistic expectation that he continues to perform at a historical level like he has. Was this more the Yankees offense just being the Yankees offense, or did you see anything from Bieber yesterday that might have suggested he wasn't completely on top of his game? Because we've talked about this on multiple podcasts the last week or so, that it was going to come down to Indians pitching versus Yankees offense. And when you've got Garrett Cole on the mound giving up, who also was spectacular, that puts a lot of pressure on Shane Bieber.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't see that coming. I mean, when you have the other 3 wild card matchups featuring either 4 or 5 combined runs scored, and then you go into the nightcap like Garrett Cole and Shane Bieber, you kind of expect that it's going to follow that trend, and instead the opposite happened, at least from the Yankees' offensive perspective. I mean, Bieber did strike out 7 batters, but he certainly didn't look like himself. I mean, I think some of it was just a bad outing, but at the same time, 7 earned runs, that's half of what he allowed in the entire regular season. I mean, it's really, you can't explain it. I mean, it's hard to break it down. He didn't look horrible, I think, from just watching him on the mound, but it clearly just, he didn't have the same control that he's had most of the season, and the Yankees offense came prepared. I mean, we saw Judge, Torres, Gardner, Stanton, all homer, So, I don't have a great explanation for it other than to say that now, the Indians are really in trouble because this is a situation where they don't have a great offense, and they do have good pitching going to the mound today in Carlos Carrasco, but this is a situation where this could, we could have another blowout in Game 2. The Yankees looking like the big favorite to advance now, and Garrett Cole, I mean, it's hard to even, you have the other side of Shane Bieber, you have a guy who goes out and goes 7 innings, 13 strikeouts, 2 earned runs. It was an incredible performance from him, and I think the Yankees have to be feeling good today.
Let me run this by you because it's something that I've been thinking a little bit about here, and I'm certainly not on my own island here. How much of the fact that, like, most of these teams haven't seen each other at all this year playing into the outcomes of these series? Because I think, it's certainly not... I think it's not insignificant that Shane Bieber didn't get a chance to throw against the Yankees this year, and that's probably something he would have gotten to do at least once in a 162-game season. Whether it's, not being able to game plan, not getting to throw against them at all, not really knowing quite as well, at least from experience, how to attack those hitters in general, not just in that series, but in general in these playoffs. How much of an impact do you think that has when, in a regular season you've seen everybody and at least have gotten to see them up close at least once? Do you think that is having an impact at all?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that's something that I've definitely seen people discussing, and I've thought about myself. And, it can kind of go both ways. I mean, you could say, Bieber hasn't faced the Yankees. You can also say the Yankees haven't faced Bieber.
Right.
But it's a really interesting point, especially when you consider that for all intents and purposes, we had 3 different leagues in baseball this year. Yes, we had the National League and the American League, but we also had the West, Central, and East. And the reality of the situation is, and this isn't at all to try to take away from Shane Bieber in any sense, but the makeup offensively of the Central divisions is a lot weaker than the Eastern divisions, for example. So just the type of opponents that he's facing when you're going up against, the Tigers and the Royals and the Pirates, when you're Shane Bieber and the Indians, I don't know if Bieber faced them, but the Indians in the Central. So there's a different dynamic there than an usual season. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what the results of that are going to be and, how much that's impacting things in the postseason. But I think it's a really interesting point because you just have this scenario where you have these teams that have kind of been in their own, regional vacuums, and now they're taking on each other. And I don't have a great, takeaway per se, but I think it's something interesting to monitor the rest of the way because I think it could be having an impact for sure.
Who do you think that benefits more, the hitter that hasn't seen the pitcher, or the pitcher that hasn't seen the hitter? Let me rephrase. Who benefits from that more, a hitter or a pitcher in terms of mystery, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I guess I want to say probably that it benefits the hitter more. I would say hitter. I'm torn. I mean, I don't know exactly. I guess it could kind of depend on the matchup too. It's like but I guess with hitters you kind of have what pitcher you're going to face. You can look at the tape and you're looking at one pitcher and what they've done this season versus if you're the pitcher, you're looking at an entire lineup that you haven't seen before. And you have to try to balance all that in individual, and the individual, batters' preferences and things like that. So I guess I'm going to lean hitting, but I think it can definitely be kind of a case-by-case thing too.
Tampa Bay, really controlling the AL for a lot of the season. They come out, get a 3-1 victory, very much in Tampa Bay fashion. They have really good pitching, and then get some runs here and there, end up winning 3-1. And even though they had less hits than Toronto, they got some timely hitting and ended up winning the baseball game. What do you think about their performance, being the top seeded team in the AL?
Yeah, you said it perfectly. It was their regular formula of pitching and just enough hitting. Blake Snell, a no-hitter into the 6th. He became this is an interesting stat, the first left-handed pitcher with 9+ strikeouts and 1 or fewer hits in a game ever in MLB postseason history,
All right,
which I
then.
found astonishing. So Blake Snell, a great performance from him, some strong defensive plays, and a home run by an unlikely player, an outfielder, Manuel Margot, and that was it. And then the Rays got another pitcher, record a save for the first time this season. They got it done, and I think this is a team maybe you have concerns about them in future series, just given some of their deficiencies. But I think in this series against the Blue Jays, they're showing why so far why they're the top seed in the AL for sure.
All right, you've got 8 games today. What are you most excited about?
Wow. Well, I would say it's tough to choose. I guess I'm excited about the Reds-Braves series getting underway. It might be a little bit of a weird pick to say, but I think this is definitely a scenario where it's one of the biggest upset picks in terms of seeding, where you have the Braves with a high seed in the NL and the Reds as a wild card team. But that's one where I think I've seen a lot of people pick the Reds to pull off the upset, and they send Trevor Bauer, the likely, or at least a very likely option for the NL Cy Young Award, to the mound against another NL Cy Young contender in Max Fried for the Braves. So that's an exciting matchup that I'm looking forward to today, to see if the Reds can steal Game 1 there. I'm also looking to see whether or not the Yankees can take Game 2 from the Indians and kind of head out of that series on a strong note. This is an Indians team that, despite everything we said, does have great pitching, so they could get themselves back in this in a hurry. So those are 2 of the games I'm looking forward to today. Also, White Sox Athletics, with Dallas Keuchel having a great season on the mound for the White Sox. I think if they take, I think that they're in a situation where they could take Game 2 pretty easily. But we also have an A's team that's been really resilient this year. So those are 3 of the games that I've got my eye on. But of course, it's going to be madness across the league today, I'm sure.
Well, grab some coffee or something, or some snacks, and take a seat and get ready for the for the absolute air raid of baseball games that are about to come your way. Chris, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Josh.
That's Chris Brown, our resident MLB expert. Follow him on Twitter at CBrownSports. If you're not, you're really missing out if you fancy yourself someone who values the MLB postseason. He's on the grind. He'll be on the grind again today with 8 baseball games set to take place today. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit more baseball, do some FYI, get out of here for the day. You're watching the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. We got one. We got one. What did we get? You might be asking. We got an NFL game postponement. Steelers Titans set for this weekend has been postponed to either Monday or Tuesday. The NFL said in a statement Wednesday a new date and time will be announced as soon as possible, adding that the postponement will allow additional time for further daily COVID-19 testing and to ensure the health and safety of players, coaches, and game day personnel. 4 positive tests coming from the Titans, starting nose tackle Daquan Jones, long snapper Bo Brinkley, and practice squad tight end Tommy Hudson, and 5 other team personnel members this week. So clearly it got out somewhere in the Titans clubhouse. The Minnesota Vikings, who played the Titans last Sunday, have not gotten any sort of... In their most recent COVID testing, saw no positive results. The Texans also had their own scare with false positives before playing the Steelers last Sunday. But here's the thing. We got positive tests and the NFL shut it down, and that's of course to be expected, but there's always let's see how they handle an outbreak in the middle of the season for the first time. And clearly it's with a postponement of the game. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a dismissal of the game, or they're gonna find a time down the line, tack it on the end of the season, whatever it might be. Because the thing here about football in general, and what makes games specifically, we'll throw baseball in there because it's the closest in terms of operation to football. Baseball choosing to not put teams in bubbles, which is fine, but what that's gonna result in is the Cardinals are going to happen where they spend a lot of time not playing games because of a COVID outbreak. The Marlins, we saw what happened with them at the beginning of the season as well. But with baseball, you can adjust a little bit, and you get 2 7-inning games for doubleheaders instead of 9-inning games when you need to make up games. I mean, in 48 days, the Cardinals played 53 games. It's a lot of baseball. And football just doesn't allow for that. You can't shorten games because it's not effective enough in terms of keeping players safe in terms of their body. It's just such a physically demanding sport, and I'm not throwing shade at baseball. It's just not as physically demanding of a sport. It's why they play 162 games, and why teams that are the best teams in baseball are just the really consistent ones, and the ones who can stay focused for an entire season. Like that's part of the challenge for baseball that it just isn't for other sports. But when you get to football, like, you really need that full week to recover and get ready for the next game. So it's not like they've decided to postpone to either Monday or Tuesday. There's part of me that's like, I mean, okay, but like, I guess so they can run tests, and even if there are players that can't play, that everybody who can play is healthy and do some of that. But listen, I mean, it takes longer than that to make sure that everyone doesn't have COVID-19. So that's a little interesting. But the point being here is that you have to do it. You have to either postpone the game until the end of the season or make it up really, really quickly, because these teams, they're playing again next Sunday, and I'm pulling up the schedules for the Titans and the Steelers right now, but I'm guessing that they don't have the same off week. Let's see, Tennessee's bye week is week 7. The Steelers' bye week is week 8. So it's not like you can just throw the game in the bye week and that's good. They get the bye week this week instead, and there's also just some things that come with that, like an unfair amount of games in a row, whatever complaint you want to add on to that, all of which are legitimate. But when you don't build in like a universal week in which that can be, I personally think that might have been a good idea, is to just, along with a bye week, there's a universal week, between weeks 11 and 12, or between weeks 14 and 16, or 14 and 15, in which there's just a week that if you have no games that need to be played, then you get another off week. Maybe you just add it on to the end of the season so that there's no unfair advantage to a team that gets a shot, because everybody will play week 17. So if somebody has to play, quote unquote, week 18, then everyone's played week 17. The teams that are about to play each other, everyone has just played. But it puts some pressure on making up games quickly, because you got to move on. There's a lot of recovery time that goes into the NFL. Your travel. It's just it makes for a bit of a sticky situation in terms of figuring out when to play these games, when to get them in. And when you're only playing 16 games, you got to find a way to get them all in, because that's the more games you play, the less the games matter. And 16 games isn't a lot of games, and they all matter quite a bit. But we'll see what that actually means for the Steelers and the Titans. NFL is seemingly responding accordingly to COVID outbreaks among their teams. I want to talk about the playoffs just for a second, the Major League Baseball playoffs, and run something by you that I noticed a little bit, and that's that yesterday the Yankees won, the White Sox won, the Rays won, and the Astros won. At least 3 of the 4, and arguably 4 of the 4. Maybe not the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays probably have a better offense than the Rays. But 3 of these 4 games were won by teams that have at least the higher ceiling for their offense, or just have the better offense. The Astros haven't had a great offense, but we're still talking about a lineup that has, we're talking about George Springer, Jose Altuve, Michael Brantley, Alex Bregman, and then you still haven't gotten Josh Reddick or Carlos Correa to the plate yet. The point being here is that through one game, the teams with the better offenses are coming out on top. So if we look at today's games, so I'll predict today's games real quick based on who has the better offense. So we'll go Braves, Astros, Cubs, White Sox. We'll go Blue Jays. Blue Jays, Padres, Yankees, Dodgers. That's the official prediction for today. Braves, Astros, because everyone's getting good starting pitching. Everyone yesterday, except for the Indians, which is ironic because they have the best pitcher in baseball right now on the mound yesterday. I think Chris is right when he says that the fact that these guys haven't seen each other gives that advantage slightly to the better offense. The better offense is going to have that slight advantage there. I think he's right in saying that, and we'll see how much that matters. And typically, I'll go with the team that has a better offense, especially when you got pretty good pitching at least at the start of the rotation. Every team has solid pitching at least at the start of the rotation. We'll see if that changes as we get deeper into rotations here. Do the Astros get a good outing from their number 2 guy? Do the Indians, who get to throw out another high-level pitcher, get a game back on the Yankees? We'll see. But yesterday, to start the playoffs, there was certainly an advantage to the teams that had the better offense. FYI, for your information, we're just going to wrap it up right here. We only got a couple minutes left on the show. For your information, like we just talked about, the Titans and the Pittsburgh Steelers game postponed to at least Monday or Tuesday. The details on the new date and time will be announced at a later time. There was no official announcement on when that game will be played. Day 2 of the MLB playoffs. We got a lot going on. 8 games today, starting right now, actually, at 11 a.m. You got the Reds and the Braves. Of course, Miami versus the Los Angeles Lakers tonight. Game 1, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. I believe that's right. 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Yes, that's what's going on in sports today. It's a big sports week. A lot going on. Sit back, relax, enjoy it. If you're looking for something to read, you can head over to 110sportsmedia.com. Chris has a ton of baseball content up there. Going up on the site in about an hour here will be my written version of my NBA Finals preview. We've got this podcast up there that came out this morning as well. We've got a bonfire episode covering MLB, the MLB wild card, and some World Series predictions. So there's a lot to get to over at 110sportsmedia.com if you haven't gotten to it yet. Very much appreciate you checking that out if you haven't already. And of course, tomorrow, Touchline Talk with Josh Doring at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Chris Brown's Around the Bases at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm sure he'll dive deep into what's happening in the playoffs on that show tomorrow. Those, like I said, 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern, respectively. I'll be back on Friday to round out the week over here at 110sportsmedia.com. Appreciate you guys hanging out today. We had Chris Brown on the show. Shouts to him for coming on and talking some baseball with us. Enjoy the games today, both baseball and basketball. We'll meet back here on Friday. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you then.